Hey there, fight fans. Jay Petrie here. We got a wonderful show of Unleashed for everybody. As you might notice, Ant Walker, our normal host, is taking care of familial duties, so he might pop in if we can get him. If not, c'est la vie. But we still have a good three-man panel here. And as our special guest, I want to invite one of our friends, colleagues, buddies, fight talkers, a good mind for the sport. And I appreciate that about Pat, that you're going to look past the surface stuff. And so, without further dudes, formerly of Body Lock, now independent, Pat Auger. How you doing, bud?
Doing good. How about you guys?
Doing well.
Can't complain here. This weekend was kind of energizing in a weird way. Like there were a lot of fights, and I can't say a ton of them were relevant, but I still felt good about that. And I guess I'll throw that to you as I introduce, of course, the everyman, the jack of all trades, who's mastered actually a surprising amount of them. I give him more credit than Mr. Walker does. Ben Duffy, are you feeling a little more energized after this weekend, or am I full of beans?
I am I frankly was kind of dreading this weekend. We joked on the last
Mhm.
show. You asked or Ant asked me what I was looking forward to, and I said I was looking forward to Sunday, just because between UFC, Bellator, and Ryzen, I think there were 36, 37 fights, pretty much just a 20-hour marathon.
Yes.
Uh, and yeah, I feel energized. All that I watched, and I watched the entire UFC card because I was on duty for it. I watched kind of the tail end of the Bellator card and went back and caught a few things earlier. I mean, the cards kind of overperformed in an entertainment sense, and even though it just looked like a big mess of fights, there was a certain amount of relevance. Like the all three of the cards, had some ranked
Mhm.
fighters up near the top. We learned a lot, and yeah, good stuff. I'm energized.
Yeah, I'm glad I put you on the spot there because it's weird how we were on the show, no bones about it, going, oh boy, here we go. We have a million fights to deal with, one after the other. UFC counter program,
Okay.
Bellator.
Oh, Bellator had like the perfect Bellator combo. They had a Gracie who couldn't fight on the undercard and a Gracie who could fight on the main card. You
It
got to
was
have that.
just magic in the woods
hmm
when you have a Bellator prelim card that I think what there were five fights. There were like 4 or 6 fighters making their professional debuts. But despite that, Bellator is actually the source of my stat of the week this week, and not the UFC or Ryzen or some nonsense that happened in the news, because that number is 3. And that number is because Neiman Gracie knocked out Mark Lemminger. Knocked out Mark Lemminger. Knocked out. Not choked out. Not anything else. No arm bars. No funny business. Standing TKO. And he is the third Gracie across all major organizations, UFC Pride, WEC Strikeforce, Ryzen, the names that we know over the years. He's just the third Gracie to knock someone out. The first one, of course, is Royce Gracie. He made Pat Smith top to strikes, which is a knockout. And Ryan Gracie in Pride, he soccer kicked somebody so hard that I think that the head was caught in the first row. 3 Gracies have knocked people out. Welcome to the Gracie Power Club, Neiman Gracie. And unfortunately, there was a UFC card before the Bellator card, and the way it was spaced out was the UFC started at 4 p.m., had the prelims, main card started, and then fight fans could drift into the Bellator main card as soon as the UFC ended, which was actually okay. And that because the Bellator prelims, they were Bellator prelims. They were not Grabaka Hitman on Twitter, the Bellator prelim sacrifice hour, as quite as they usually are. However, they were okay. But the biggest story, I think, is the main event of the UFC card because it was one of the only ranked fights this weekend, essentially, and that Anthony Smith dropped Ryan Spann multiple times, flattened him out, and choked him out with her RNC in the first round. Don't look now. Anthony Smith is on a win streak. He's on a finish streak. He has finished Jimmy Crute, Devin Clark, and Ryan Spann now in rapid succession, all in the first round. He's making us look bad. Us meaning those that wrote him off and said, "Oh, Smith, he did his time. The Glover Teixeira, sorry, Anthony, it's only business. Okay. And he couldn't punch in the face. And everybody thought Anthony Smith was done. Y'all must have forgot. So, Pat, I want to throw this to you. It's a swing or miss, and it's a pretty easy one based on what you've seen the past year or so. Swing or miss, Pat. Anthony Smith is going to make his way to another title shot before he hangs up his gloves.
I think that's a swing means it's going to happen, right? Yeah. Okay. So I think that's a swing, but not necessarily because not necessarily because he deserves it. The thing about Anthony Smith is he's a very good fighter and kind of a gatekeeper, right? He was kind of a gatekeeper even middleweight. Then he went up. He knocked out old men and then beat Volkan Ozdemir, and and Gustafsson, who has had a just massive drop off. The problem is the light heavyweight division is so shallow that you kind of have to give Anthony Smith a title shot because he's good enough. He's going to be hanging around that top 5, top 10 until he hangs him up. But I don't foresee him getting past guys like Jiri. I can't say his name right ever, but you know who I'm talking about. Jiri, Glover, Jan. Alexander Rakic, right? They're trying to do a rematch there. I feel like that probably goes the same way. There's enough guys ahead of him that he probably shouldn't, but light heavyweight is so shallow. There's also not a lot of up-and-coming contenders that I think are going to leapfrog him to get a shot. So unless the division pool changes, unless they get some new prospects that end up panning out really well, I think he ends up getting a title shot based off of lack of available fighters.
So Ben, are you in that same boat that Anthony Smith is I don't want to say just good enough because he's knocked off 3 top 50. Well, Devin Clark was in that charitably ranked 15, so we have a nice number on the side of the name, like how Robbie Lawler is now suddenly ranked despite not winning since 2017 over Donald Cerrone type of situation. So Devin Clark, I guess he was ranked, but Jimmy Crute's a guy who people were talking about, and Ryan Spann was one of those type of guys who people were like, this guy could go on a run. He had the Johnny Walker ing, I guess, for lack of a better word, the Johnny Walker ing, and other than that, he looked pretty good. So Ben, Anthony Smith, is this another run for the belt for him? What are you thinking?
I agree with Pat. I wouldn't favor Smith against any of the guys that are kind of ahead of him in line. Like Yuri Prohaska is probably going to get the next title shot at whoever wins between Jan and Glover. And really, you could make a case that Alexander Rakic should be able to sit and get a shot after that. But if they made Rakic fight Smith again, I see no reason it wouldn't turn out exactly the same. But at this point, even if he has to wait another whole year and fight 2 more times, I don't see any of the people behind him in line giving him any trouble. I've picked wrongly against him twice in this 3-fight win streak. Like I picked him to beat Clark. I picked against him in the Crute fight. I picked against him in the Spann fight. You know what? In a couple weeks, Thiago Santos and Johnny Walker are fighting. If they match the winner of that up against Anthony Smith, like notwithstanding that Santos beat Smith back at middleweight, 3 knee ligaments ago for Santos, I think Anthony Smith tools the winner of that fight. Like they almost need to get him into another title shot just so he stops wrecking like those 10 through 15 up and comers. Otherwise he's just going to get into that kind of like Joseph Benavidez, like John Fitch space where he's just, or help. The gold standard for that now is Holly Holm, who is like bottlenecking 2 divisions. Like they almost need to like rush him to another title shot. Like what they need to do is if like Glover pulls off the upset over Blachowicz, just put Glover versus Smith too, and just hope Smith dies. I don't know.
Guest ref Mario Yamasaki or something. Yeah, I'm picking up what you guys are putting down here. I mean, Smith, he has there's a real demarcating line between talent and what we've seen from what he's done versus the fighters above him and the fighters below him. You can pretty much look at the list and go, okay, everybody ranked above him has already beaten him, and everybody ranked below him has already lost to him. Like this is a kind of a division that even though he's fought at 205, 8 times now or something like that, and maybe not even 8 times, he's still managed to fight a lot of the members of the rankings. I don't know why the UFC would be pushing for the Rakic fight, because let's Alexander Rakic should be on a, I believe it's a 15 fight win streak. Like let's be clear here. He beat Volkan Ozdemir. That was a very, very poor decision, and I would argue that he should be in line for a title shot now. Okay, fine, he lost. That's the official record. So you need to put him up against guys. What does he do? He thoroughly dismantles Anthony Smith, wrestles, it just doesn't beat him as bad as Glover did, and then does kind of the same thing to Thiago Santos. There's nothing that would say to me that 1 year, not even a year and change later, this fight would look differently. It's not the Chuck Randy situation. It's not like the rematch you can go, maybe this thing might pull a different way. With Rocket's skill set and how easily he brought Smith down, I just can't see Smith staying on his feet long enough to do anything and get wrestled for 5 rounds.
And the first fight wasn't terribly exciting. There are two normally pretty reliably exciting fighters who kind of laid an egg. Like, why would you run that back? I don't get it at all.
It's why we're calling for Francis Ngannou, Derek Lewis too so badly. Anyway, I think that Smith is probably going to get the charity. I say charity, even though he'll probably earn it. Like, he might put together a 4 or 5 fight win streak. Boy, oh boy. But, and then he'll fight Yuri Prochazka. And then what's Yuri going to do? Okay. What would happen if Prochazka fought Anthony Smith? Bad, horrible things. It would be blood and mayhem and mess, and Anthony Smith would probably be picking up his teeth like Devin Clark. I mean, maybe the other way would happen because Yuri gets hit a lot. But I just seeing that like a blender of fists. What do you feel otherwise, Pat?
No, I mean, I think the smart money is on Yuri, but like as you mentioned, the one thing about Yuri is he's so wild. I could also easily see Smith just landing a right and just flatlining Yuri, and then just like derailing everything. And then what do? Right? Like, please don't make Anthony Smith versus Yuri. Like, let him fight.
That's exactly what's going to happen.
Yeah, that's my fear. It's just. Yeah.
So then, should he fight like a Dominic Reyes then, a title challenger? He's lost a few. I mean, I don't like it as I said it because I like the whole Joe Silva style winners fight winners. Smith has won a bunch. Reyes has lost a bunch. But is that the kind of way that the UFC should matchmake him against a top 5 name that's kind of hurting, so they can push him, so they can kind of tamp Smith back down again?
Go ahead, Pat.
I was just gonna say, the only thing that I could see that would make sense would be if you want to put him into what they were trying to put Pettis and Yoel into, of being like, hey, real up and coming guys that are like they want to give the fast push to, like, go ahead, give him to Smith so he can legitimate win, throw you right into title shot contention. Otherwise, I don't know what you do with him.
Yeah, it's simultaneously an easy division to get a title shot for, and a really difficult one to get one, because of how infrequently the light heavyweight belt seems to be up for grabs these days. And we'll see if Anthony Smith gets another title shot before. What do you figure? Summer 2022 somehow he'll step in as an injury replacement or something. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. I swear, I wouldn't be surprised if he might be the backup phone call for the title fight for Jan and Glover.
It helps that he's a guy who cuts so little weight that he can step up on short notice.
That's
and you're going to get good Anthony Smith. I mean, I know they said leading up to this fight, oh, now he walks around at like 220 pounds. It's like, dude, most of those guys cut to 220 during camp and then cut that last 15. Like,
didn't they say on the broadcast that Spann was coming from 235 or something like that?
It wouldn't surprise me at all.
Yeah.
I mean, he is huge. Ryan Spann is a gigantic dude. Well, this is something that my co-host on the previews and recaps, Keith Schillen, said about Mike Rodriguez, who he sees all the time up in Boston. It's like when he walks into the room, it's not like a fighter. It's like it looks like an NBA forward walked into the room. Like just they're kind of like tall, like really kind of like wide shouldered, like really like huge wingspan. Yeah, that's what Ryan Spann looks like. Like he's about Michael Jordan size, like 6'5", 6'6", like just huge wingspan. Yeah,
you feel that there were a few fighters the UFC was kind of quietly hoping would win, like Spann, like Pannie Kianzad, to kind of push through and because the alternative is, oh no, are we going to give Raquel Pennington another title shot after that? I mean, who she'll have to fight at the top again, right? And it's too bad that the divisions are so stuck the way they are. And speaking of stuck divisions, there are a few other stuck divisions in other companies. Like light heavyweight is stuck in the regard that Vadim Nemkov, the light heavyweight champion, has a very impressive win over Phil Davis. Davis is out of the tournament, so the thought of him coming back and rising up the ranks to get another title shot against Nemkov is tough. But Davis did a thing this weekend. He not only outstruck Yoel Romero, which everybody seems to do that. Apparently, Keith Schillen's mom could do that. Is that the right way to use that expression, or is that about fighting for a title at 135? Anyway, Yoel Romero did the Yoel Romero thing where he kind of hop around and then not commit to anything. But Phil Davis out wrestled him, pillar to post.
Yep.
5 takedowns. Phil Davis landed 5 takedowns on Yoel Romero. The entire time Yoel Romero was in the UFC, combined, only 7 takedowns against Yoel Romero. So Phil Davis did a real impressive thing.
Oh, and these were not like pity pat takedowns. Like you look at even just the photo gallery from that event, and you see him like shooting through a man's hips like an NFL safety, dude.
Yeah.
Like they're great, like double leg takedowns. That had to be really satisfying.
But the hyper impressive, incredibly impressive. I was looking at that going, okay, it was a little boring until suddenly he was tossing Yoel Romero around like a toy. But Neiman Gracie scored a knockout, boys, over not a tomato can. I mean, Mark Leminger's got hands too. He's he's lost a few by knockout, but Neiman Gracie put him away on the feet. That finishing combo, the left and the elbow, oh, that was something. So Pat, I guess I'll start with you. Which of those two performances which was more impressive to you at Bellator? Davis doing what he did or Neiman Gracie?
To me, it's got to be Davis, just because, in the fight game, you can always land a good punch, right? Didn't Betchkaheya knock out somebody at one point? Like
probably by accident.
Yeah. Like it's, I mean, like you can always land one right on the button and put somebody out. That's puncher's chance. That's where that comes from. Mm-hmm. But to out wrestle somebody with Yoel's pedigree and do it so well, I mean, that's just skill, and that's something to me is mind blowing. I did not expect that to happen. And yeah, Davis, I feel bad for Davis because he doesn't get enough love. Right? He's so good. Man. He's so ridiculously good, and it feels like he's just been a afterthought for since he left UFC to go to Bellator, and then he won the belt and then lost, and it's like, oh, okay, yeah, Phil was just a placeholder. Yeah. It's like, man, the dude is incredibly gifted. He has had an amazing career with some, consistently good wins, and for him to do that to Yoel, even though I saw a lot of people also saying, oh, Yoel is older now. It's like, yes, he is. That's true, but still, I mean, that's just crazy stuff. So for me, it's Davis all the way.
I'm happy you mentioned that Phil Davis being underappreciated because, yeah, his only losses since leaving the UFC are another one of those fights with Ryan Bader, which were like, yeah, we knew that was going to go to the split decision. And in not one, it was actually 2 losses to Nemkov that he has on his ledger. So that makes it even harder sledding. But Nemkov's the real deal. Like, this is not a guy we go, oh, boy, he is nothing. Like, he fought Yuri in Ryzen mode, Yuri, I think we can call him that. Ryzen enhanced Yuri, and then Carl Albertson, which that'd be a fun match one day. So yeah, he is criminally underappreciated, and even despite that, and that Yoel Romero's like 57 years old, and all of the things that he has, Duffy, was that more impressive to you? What Davis did to him, to Romero, or is it the Neiman getting hands going type of approach?
I'm with Pat here. I'd lean towards Davis's performance for two reasons. One, obviously, just in a vacuum, the wrestling, like effortlessly taking down Yoel Romero like that, like emphatic takedowns that, I mean, he was probably winning the fight anyway, but really sealed the deal. And didn't seal the deal in the sense of like I got a cheesy takedown with 40 seconds left in the round, but I used my wrestling to dominate, a fighter that couldn't handle it. Really impressive, and impressive because it's out of character for Phil Davis. My complaint with Phil Davis all along has been, despite just how physically gifted he is, how good he is at the different component parts of MMA. Like, obviously, he's always been an elite wrestler, but his striking has advanced leaps and bounds since his early UFC days. Like, he's over in Bellator, like head kicking people.
Yeah.
He has like just beautiful straight punches and combinations now. My complaint with Phil Davis is that he never makes adjustments. Like, if he loses the first round of a fight, you know how the rest of the fight's going to look. Like, I felt that way when the second Nemkov fight came around. I'm like, okay,
Yep.
he loses 30-27. I know exactly how the rest of this fight goes. But here he made adjustments between rounds as Yoel tried different things, as Yoel got more tired. Like, Phil Davis, who like reacts and makes adjustments, is dangerous. Phil Davis, I don't want to see him fight Nemkov again, but he could still make a lot of noise in that division.
I'm going to, not just for the sake of being interesting on the show and having a devil's advocate position, but I'm going to use several of your points, Ben, to emphasize why I think Neiman Gracie actually had the more impressive performance. Because we've seen this from Phil Davis, and we know that he can do this. We know he can impose his wrestling on most fighters, not name Rumble Johnson or Ryan Bader or Vadim Nemkov. He can fight his way in and have his bizarrely long limbs slip up a head kick, make you prepare for that, and then shoot down for double. He can deceptively do that, and I can't take away from his win, Davis's win, even though Yoel Romero hasn't won a fight in who knows how long, and even when he did, he missed weight because of course that's what you do. And I feel like that Bellator should have given Romero a showcase fight, but they didn't. They gave him a top two, I think Davis is number 2 or so, to really throw him in deep waters. And that's I think that was a disservice to Romero to not let him show off, because we don't know what Romero can do. Honestly, we don't. We know he can hang with really great fighters, but that's still a loss. Another loss, another loss. Like Jose Aldo at bantamweight, until he finally beat Marlon Vera, it was very, very impressive that he kept up with Marlon Moraes, that he kept up Peter Yan for the most part, but he still kept losing. So we go, okay, his ceiling is somewhere underneath these guys, but we don't know how high he can go. And I think Yoel Romero, we don't know how good he is anymore. We just know he's not quite good enough to beat all these names. Whereas if he fought a fighter on, I don't know, say the light heavyweight version of Mark Lemminger, maybe we could know what he can do. Lemminger isn't a top 10 guy, is whatever, but he's a dangerous, tough threat. And what you said, Ben, about how Davis approached this fight differently, his striking has improved. He approached literal angles, approached the striking, I thought was impressive that Davis did. But Neiman Gracie did that to a degree I've never seen before. I had this discussion with Sherdog contributor Lev Pisarski about how Neiman Gracie has had striking, but it generally has been, as we've talked about Phil Davis, means to an end. Close the distance, get in, body lock, trip, whatever you got to do to get it done, or to get close enough, change levels quickly for a double. And Neiman Gracie has been like that. Like, he'll charge face first to a heel hook, and he'll get it on John Fitch because, life finds a way. But what he did to Lemminger was different. He approached the fight differently. He had no interest in taking the fight down. He didn't even have that, it's not the takedown, but it's the threat of the takedown that takes you out of the game, where Neiman Gracie straight up stalked this guy down and smashed his face off. And that's not a Gracie thing. That's just historically, Ryan Gracie is the only guy I can think of that will be like, I'm going to come right at you and smash your face off. Like, we can say that about Kron Gracie when he fought Cub Swanson, but that's a very small window. So what Gracie did, changing things up so much and putting the combinations the way that he did, really, really made me go, I want to see him against top guys. And when I saw Phil Davis beat Yoel Romero, I didn't feel looking at that going, boy, I'd love to see him fight Ryan Bader again, name again, whatever again. I think he could look at it differently. Whereas I think Neiman Gracie, I think, boy, Neiman Gracie with hands might be a threat to Rory McDonald had they been able to fight in Bellator. So yeah, that's my $150 there. And that's a very short thought about Neiman Gracie, very truncated belief. And speaking of short thoughts, this next segment is called Shallow Cuts, and it's just a very brief, quick one-off questions that we will have Mr. Auger take the questions that we have here and assign one to Mr. Duffy, assign one to myself, and then I will bestow one to you after. And it is your pick. You can decide who you're going to give it to and when do you want it. Go right ahead, Pat. Take it away.
All right. Let's start off with you, Mr. Duffy. All right. I'll give you this one. I want to get your thoughts. What's scarier, a wild, brawling Ion Cutelaba or a smart, calculated Ion Cutelaba?
Oh, I mean, to meet on the street, obviously it would be like old Cutelaba, but the Cutelaba that we saw in the cage on Saturday, the one that was more calculating, that was willing to wrestle, that didn't gas himself out. If I'm a UFC light heavyweight, that's a much scarier man. Like no risk of the guy getting himself disqualified before the fight starts. Like I made the joke before the fight that he's so scared of gassing out that he tries to hit the guys like before the fight starts. He's like, if I can get ahead in round 0, then maybe if I get tired in round 2, like I can still hold on to win. No, the new Cutelaba, that was all of his problems are really between the ears. He has all the component skills, and he is a standout athlete, even by the standards of kind of a standout athlete division. Yeah, much scarier.
All right, Pat.
All right.
What do you got for me?
So this one I'm very curious because we've talked here and there when we were working together and so on, but I don't think we've ever talked about Rizin too much. So the semifinalists of the Rizin Bantamweight Tournament set, who are you favoring to go all the way?
Ooh, that's, man. I didn't watch No, I'm kidding. I absolutely watched. I watched the whole kit and caboodle. I wrote an article about it. You can find it on Sherdog. There were 3 semifinalists. We're like, yeah, of course Kai Asakura. Of course Naoki Inoue is going to get it. Of course Hiro is going to get to the finals or semifinals. You knew that. But I thought Yuki Matoya was going to get there. And Kenta Takazawa just said, no, I'm going to smash you in the face and knock you through the ropes so that Yuki, he's getting knocked out as he's falling through the ropes going no more. Like that caught me and went, maybe this guy can do it. But against who he's fighting, what a nightmare to have to go, oh man, I'm impressed with my striking. Who am I going to fight next? Kai Asakura. Are you freaking kidding me? Like this tournament was built for Kai Asakura. This was obviously the get him the title back type of situation after the Horiguchi situation where he knocked out Kyoji Horiguchi, but the belt was not in the line, so he didn't actually become champion from that fight. This tournament is the coronation that Rizin is staging for Kai Asakura. And because of that, and because MMA is brutal and absolutely relentless, give me Naoki Inoue. I think that he is craftier. I think he's sturdier. I think he's smart enough to not get into a dumb brawl. He's a better grappler, I found. He likes Rizin. And by that I mean he's already soccer kick knock out somebody. So that kind of tells you, as a former UFC talent, that he has the chops. I think he's going to shock the world and go all the way. And I'll be totally wrong on December 31st, and I can't wait.
And I'm just sitting here with my JMMA bingo card going, dude falls through the ropes, champ loses non-title fight. Yeah. Like just
and not even falls to the ropes, like walks like he's leaving. He literally puts his leg there and he's like, "Nah, I'm just out, man."
Like I don't know if it was because he got hit so hard so often that he just wanted to go, I'm going home. But he had the face of I want to go home.
He clearly just takes his leg. It looks like getting out of the ring. He doesn't fall there. He's just like, no, I'm going. I'm done with this. That was ridiculous.
No, the only thing I'll add is that Rizin, the matches haven't been made yet. They're still deciding or matchmaking or whatever. Most of the possible options will be rematches. Like, there's only one person Kai Asakura can face that won't be a rematch. So I'm curious if they're going to do that or if they're going to station them so that Asakura, in a way, is the final. I don't know, but that's something. I'm glad we got to talk about that, Pat. I guess I'll turn the tables on you. And although I feel like there's a financial aspect to the question I'm about to ask you, I'm not going to ask it. Instead, I'm going to ask you a matchmaking / card placement question. In that the UFC card, Raquel Pennington versus Penny Kianzad, top 15 bantamweight fight, was stuck on the prelims. Ariane Lipski, who's 2-4 in the UFC, and Mandy Bone is a UFC newcomer. That was way higher up in the card. So Pat, I mean, why? Why was that? Why did that happen?
Well, see, first of all, you've fallen into a trap because this is also financially related. But
yes,
so
it's all
here's
about the money with Pat.
Yes.
Maybe that's why I asked you the question.
Could be. Here's the thing. Dana has said, especially in a couple of live Q&As he did during the pandemic, he talks about the analytics they do to see how much a fighter is tracking with various social media platforms, all of that. He talked about Chase Super's Contender Series fight doing just crazy numbers, which is part of the reason they've pushed Chase a bit. The only reason that I can see Ariane Lipski versus Mandy Bohm being pushed on the main event, and the main reason why Ariane Lipski still has a job despite really, having a pretty rough start compared to what her expectations were coming in, is because she tracks extremely well in certain social metrics, I would imagine. That would be the reason that I think they put them up there. Is normally the third card on a main event doesn't really influence, if it's like a pay-per-view, doesn't influence it too much big. But anytime you have somebody you want to showcase, they're going to be put on the main card. Whether or not that helps boost their numbers, whether or not it actually gives them that star building, snowball, that's another situation. But I think this situation is a pretty glaring example of they must have seen some metrics that showed, okay, Lipski has some pull here. Let's see what she does against Bohm. Or maybe both of them did. And it was, okay, let's put them together and see what happens. And that's why they got the main event slot. And Lipski looked great. I mean, she looked a lot better than she had in most of her other fights against someone who was more, I would say, stiffer competition than some of her other wins. And I think it's something where you're going to see them continually try and push Lipski because she has the look, she has the credentials, that violence queen mantra from KSW coming in. That's why she got put on the main card. I think it's more Lipski than Bohm, but it must have been metrics and social media type of interactions, I would assume.
Yeah, it's a tough spot because I would argue that she would have been cut had Lipski lost, because that would have been a losing streak of 3 in a row, and she would have been 2-5 in the UFC, or 2-5. Yeah, 2-5. I don't know. Duffy, you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I agree with what OJ said. I mean, he gave a much more analytic way than I would have of just saying that Ariane Lipski is very hot and has a huge social media following. And then while it ended up being a very entertaining fight, Pennington versus Kianzad had all the earmarks of just being a dreadful fight to watch. And the last thing they wanted to do was just throw the main card into the mud halfway through, with Pennington just grinding out a miserable split decision over Kianzad. But it ended up being lively, I guess no harm, no foul. And if it's all on the same free cable channel, really what's even at stake?
And that's why they put unranked heavyweight fights.
I am paying for it, but yeah.
We're all paying for it. Trust me.
Yeah, I'm paying for the right to see Burger King ads, and let's go there.
Yeah, those
just bring back Shack Pack, man. I don't know why I'd do any other ad.
Man, those commercials again and again make me really, really salty, and just oh my god, I'm all right, enough. I don't care about whomever this person is on there, and I couldn't help but think of Salt when I think of this next question, because we're breaking out Salt, we're breaking out all our paprikas and our red pepper flakes because we got to get a little spice in here, and we're going to spice up our Crow because there were a lot of fights that happened this weekend, and I guarantee that some of us totally botched some of them. And so with that, I'm going to ask you of all the fights this weekend, probably UFC card if you didn't necessarily see all of the fights. Duffy, we'll start with you. Which pick did you completely botch?
Oh, well, I went 7-6-1 on the UFC card, so like I missed plenty. But as far as ones where I didn't just get the outcome wrong, but the whole complexion of the fight was different than I expected. I mean, I will just go right back to the Lipsky versus Bohm fight. I had seen precious little tape on Bohm, but just knowing that there's a physically strong flyweight, and just with how inconsistent Lipsky had been, where her only 2 UFC wins literally were over like 2 of the worst women in the division. I just picked Bohm out of an abundance of mistrust for Lipsky, but Lipsky looked great. I didn't realize that Bohm was going to come in with the ultimate make Ariane Lipsky look like a world beater plan, which is throw 1 strike at a time, and anytime it hits the ground, make sure you're on bottom, just because the difference between top position Lipsky and bottom position Lipsky is so night and day. So yeah, Lipsky completely pieced her up and mauled her on the ground as well and looked absolutely sensational. I wish Bohm had like kind of let me in on what the plan was going to be. You know, I wouldn't have picked it that way.
Not too bad. Yeah, I don't want to trash on fighters. I don't ever like to fighter bash, but I had also seen Mandy Bohm's footage, which is why I picked against her. So, Mr. Auger, what did you fail miserably at picking this week? Because there has to be one.
Oh yeah, no, I did. I'm very upset because I haven't been betting for a while now, but I thought about going back into the betting space with this. I went 12 and I only got 2 wrong. So there's 15 fights, so I went 13 and 2.
There was a draw.
Oh, 14. Yeah. Oh, okay, gotcha. Okay, so yeah,
12 right? You did. Dang.
Yeah,
did great.
No, I did fantastic. But one of them was Lipsky Bohm. Then the other was Gravely versus Maness, where I really thought Gravely was going to do Gravely things. Looking at it, I was like, man, Maness is good and maybe make it interesting, but it'll be fun. Almost gets the finish, and then or does, and it just doesn't get stopped, whichever way you want to go with it, and then turns around and just shades of Dwight Grant versus Daniel Rodriguez ref decision, like, I'm gonna let it go, and then flips around and Maness gets that knockout. I was just like, okay, then I guess that's that. So yeah, that was me and Crow.
Yeah, I didn't do as I think I got 10 or 11. I did okay. I did fine. Didn't do spectacularly. And I think I'm going to use this to talk about a fight I picked right, but for the wrong reasons. Because I thought Hulk Cutelaba was going to smash all the way through Devin Clark. Devin Clark, a guy whose all of his losses are by, I think, first-round stoppage. And I thought that Cutelaba, a guy who, spoiler alert, basically all of his finishes are first-round knockouts. And this was a pretty no-brainer one. Now, I actually, when I was preparing the Prime Picks piece to talk about this fight, I originally had Cutelaba, but then I thought, the odds are good for Cutelaba. He's 160 or so, but I really think that he's going to put Clark away, and we can turn it up and make it. And I'll just say that fight should have been stopped. I was right. I'm going to take that. I'm salty about the fact that I was correct, because that fight was over, and I don't mean that from a logistical sense.
Is this the first time that in the history of Taste by Crow that somebody's been salty about a correct fight?
No, I've watched a couple right picks, but it's because I had Cutelaba knocking him clean out, and he did. TKO, corner stoppage, doctor stoppage, anything like that should have been the reasonable, rightful result of the fight. At the end of round 2, when Devin Clark was asking his father, his corner, who was his father, I don't think, should I keep going? I don't think I should keep going. And his dad's like, no, son, your jaw looks fine. We'll tape it up with some, whatever electrical tape backstage. You'll be good. This is a guy who in the Sherlock play-by-play, I sometimes like to experiment and slide in phrases and see if I can drop some references. The words "hammer smashed face" were used for Devin Clark because his jaw folded in on itself, and therefore I am very salty that this fight was not stopped like it should have been, because his jaw is now wired shut, a la Ronda Rousey. Anyway, I'm gonna go on a low sodium diet right here real quick, and I'm going to throw this question out there, and I know there's a person I really want to know about what his thoughts are on it, and that's also Ben Duffy. Now, I really want to know what both of you think about the one championship disclosures that came out. The finances came out from Bloody Elbow, saying that, surprise, spoiler alert, oh my God, no way, one championship is again getting historic millions of dollars in losses for operating in 2020. Now, we can understand the pandemic was part of it, but to the degree that you're like, how are you operating? How is this happening? And one championship decided on its financial disclosures to sell it to itself, and it has not paid itself yet. So that's fun. And there was a little dispute between Chatri, the CEO of one, and Bloody Elbow. So Pat, floor's yours for now, and we'll throw to Duffy right afterwards. What do you got on that whole one finances thing?
Nothing much, man. I mean, Chachi
All
all
right,
the way. I don't want to
that's
get
good
sued. Yeah, it's one of those things where, yeah, I mean, I've covered this stuff for a while. I was lucky to be the one to break the 2019 financials very shortly before John. I think John was a little upset about that, which wasn't his fault. So that was pretty funny. Yeah, I mean, this is something that John's really done. John Nash from Bloody Elbow has really done the big work on, and for a long time now. And it's not shocking at all if you look at their 2019, the 2018, 2017 financials and beyond. It's just been one of those things where they've had a lot of weird accounting practices, specifically these barter transactions, which have gone away now, but at the time didn't make a ton of sense, to just outrageous marketing spend, where they're just part of the reason they're trying to tout those huge viewing numbers, right, of 1 billion, trillion, whatever it is.
2.6 potential viewers. Billion potential viewers.
Just 2.6. Only 2.6 total viewers. Yeah, it's they've been pumping money into marketing to help those viewer numbers, with the end goal of eventually signing a broadcast deal or some type of merger. That's part of why they're doing a SPAC, special purpose acquisition, to try and get that all together so that they can get a big broadcast media rights deal, similar to what the UFC did, or kind of what Bellator did by being owned by Viacom and all of that. Their money situation has always been shady, and there are things that I can't go into detail about because I were never able to confirm sources on it, and now the body lock is pretty much defunct on that end. But I mean, it goes very deep with what they're doing with some of the accounting and things like that, from everything that I've heard. And this just highlights it and brings more of it to light. I would hope that if you are an angel investor or you are a P&E firm or what have you, I would hope you would look at these numbers, and especially now that 2 certain board members have left who were really embroiled in a lot of things, I would hope you would look at this and understand the risk involved. However, having worked a lot in my day job in P&E and with VCs and all startups of all kinds, I will tell you that as long as Chatri can sweet talk some potential people and find those people, which it seems like he's very good at, one's going to be fine. They're going to keep getting money invested. They're going to keep going. How long can he keep that up is really the question. Because at this point, there's no real viable path to profitability here that I see, that Nash, talks about. There's some shady dealings with what they're doing. I would not personally want to be involved with this, but maybe there's something we're missing. Maybe Chatri really does have secret things and all of this. But if you look at the comments and questions that Nash gave him 2 weeks to answer. Chatri's response on the MMA Hour with Ariel Helwani, all of these signs point to no bueno. This is not something you want to get involved in. So I'm not shocked by it. I think they will probably survive at least another year since he went back to certain investors. If it's the same group I've heard of, he'll probably get some lifeline there. But beyond that, unless they actually close a media deal in the next 12 to 18 months, I think that's it. I think one's done. That's what I'm predicting at this point. If you don't have some announcement of like TNT enters into a $25 million blah, 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 or what have you, they're done in 18 months.
Well, TNT, I think TNT's out. TNT and BR, I think that's.
Oh, yeah.
That's,
yeah, I mean.
And I don't think I think the contract's up and they're not interested at all in re-upping. I don't think that was a good return on investment, judging by the numbers we saw, the domestic numbers at TNT, the one on TNT shows were, boy, oh boy, they were not great. And there's another angle, and this is an angle I want to throw out to Ben about, that you didn't mention, and I feel like deserves some sort of a discussion. That one championship, as it is required based in Singapore, has to disclose its numbers to the government. The Singapore version of the SEC, Security Exchange Commission, has to. The finances are on public. They're on file. They're there. That's how they've been received. That's how they've been studied by John Nash and Pat, you, and so many other people, because these are a matter of public record. But one championship is relocating its headquarters and or financial operations to the Cayman Islands.
The place literally just synonymous with shady finances. Like when you got shit to hide, like you moved to the Cayman Islands. It's like something straight out of a John Grisham novel from 1996. It's so funny. The mixture of bluster, shadiness, and incompetence that just oozes out of every pore of one championship is just absolutely amazing to me. And you can tell that Nash's article struck a nerve because one championship CEO, Chatri Sityodtong, he made the rounds. Like, he did more interviews in the last 2 weeks than he probably had in the 2 years before that.
And he didn't say anything.
No. Well, that's what I'm saying. He went to talk with Helwani. He went to Junkie. He went to MMA Fighting. He came to Sherdog. And just steadfastly refused to talk about what everybody wanted to talk to him about. It was amazing. Just absolutely amazing. That, yeah, he like just flat out denied that the numbers were correct, said that the internet's a dangerous place. You have no idea, bro. And but yeah, just refused to be pinned down. And to his credit, new Dark Helwani gave him a little bit of a push, like to the point where if he'd gone any further, I think just Chatri would have pulled off his mic and walked off. I don't get it. I think it's what Pat mentioned, that he's kind of the figurehead, and just he needs to be out there, like putting on the brave face to continue to convince their investors to keep sinking money into this. But they'll do that, and then on the other side, the same entity, I remember a year ago, they made a press release that they'd laid off 20% of their staff and had borrowed like $50 million. And the one time a year that I completely agree with Dana White, because he just retweeted it and was like, LOL, why would you tell people this? I don't get it. It's just a perfect storm of bluster, incompetence, and shadiness.
And I have 12 different ways to go about this, but I don't want to, because I know we're probably going to be stressed for time and I could spend an hour on this. One championship has 3.76 million subscribers on YouTube. 3.76. You know what their videos have? 9.7 thousand views, 27,000 views. A championship fight, 100,000 views. For 3.75 million subscribers. That doesn't happen on YouTube. Look at a YouTube channel that has 3 million subscribers. Every video is going to have 2 million views.
Sherdog has 13,000 subscribers on YouTube, and we got 3 million views of a video of Ben Askren and Jake Paul shoving each other.
Yeah, it's. I mean, that is just the tiniest.
So what you're saying is one championship just needs to do a series of Jake Paul and Ben Askren shoving each other.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They had Ben Askren, like, you know.
They didn't know what they had until you don't know what you have till it's gone, and then they got Mighty Mouse who plays video games, but I guess they're okay with that. You know, the problem I have with the whole situation, and there's a lot of problems, but the biggest problem I have was Chatri's response, because his response in the MMA Hour and the other subsequent interviews he gave with the other outlets was the same packaged answer about how that we don't want to dispute it because the article is so wrong. Here's the thing. These numbers were pulled from the Singapore government's financial site. If they're wrong, it's because one championship filed false documents. So if your allegation or your claim is that the numbers that Bloody Elbow were putting out are wrong, it's because you put false, fake, wrong numbers.
At least for 2019 and 2018. For 2020, they haven't actually filed it with ARCA yet. But yes. But they will. It will all be the same.
And if it's all the same, how can you get up and say the actual data that we report is fake? You can't have that situation. You can't say our finances that we publicly report are false, because that doesn't exist. Like, conceptually, I'm like pushing past what he's saying, just from a logical standpoint, to look at this and go, it's one thing to make numbers up about viewers and potential viewers, and our audiences are the biggest ever, and we're the biggest organization ever. In the meantime, a live one championship event on YouTube will have 33,000 views on YouTube for a live event. I know, I picked it, I checked it, I screenshotted it. So everything is a lie. Everything is made up and the points don't matter. And I don't want to get down this rabbit hole and talk about Campbell McLaren's numbers about Univision, because if your numbers are so awesome with Combat Global, where are your numbers that you had from Access TV? Were they that good? No. So you're saying that you switched to Univision with the same company, the same fighters, and overnight you tripled your audience because you built the brand? So anyway, speaking of nonsense organizations that exist out there, there is word of a league coming out called the WFL. And we don't know a lot about it. The details are still very obviously hazy. It will launch approximately in 2023 and or never. It's a team-based organization that will have a CBA, that will have collective bargaining. It will have a 50-50 revenue share and a bunch of other things for fighters like insurance and a pension and things like that. So, I mean, when you come into the MMA sphere, the issue isn't necessarily if you can build a brand, build a company, because we see fledgling outfits come and go really quickly. They'll burst through. Rizin came out of basically nowhere. Like Dream had ended many years before that, so it wasn't just Sakakibara rebranding Dream and going with that same momentum. And Rizin did fairly well, and so you can do that. But the problem is with the number of eyeballs that you can draw on your product, because that's, of course, the big way to get it. So, Duffy, I want to ask you this first: Can WFL, can it compete? If this what we have heard so far, the few things I discussed and more, a very large version of IFL. If you don't know what that is, look it up. And when I say international, obviously you say Fight League. Is this, Duffy? Is this kind of organization one that can break through? Or is this just another XFL?
I mean, obviously, as you said off the top, we know next to nothing about this. I mean, the fact that it'll be team-based and that there will be collective bargaining kind of like baked into the foundation of it, that's really the whole selling point and the hook so far. But unless it's structured some way that I can't even imagine right now, I think it's doomed to failure. And I say this as someone like I like variations in structure in MMA. I like that there are alternatives out there to the UFC model. I like that there are promotions out there that still run Grand Prix. I like that I I mean, for all their foibles, I like that PFL has at least tried to do something different. Just trying to do a regular season format in as unpredictable a sport as MMA just has never worked. Having said that, MMA is not a team sport. It just isn't. Like, and the IFL failed miserably. The IFL failed horribly. You could argue that in their last year or two, the IFL had the second best roster in the sport. Like,
Yeah.
better, better
Quad
than
City
Strikeforce.
Silverbacks, baby. That's what I'm saying. Hour 20 minutes away.
And that organization didn't stop sucking until the last 4 or 5 events where they just abandoned the team format and just put together the best cards they could. Like, it's the problem is, you're taking these fighters, and I assume they're going to be top level fighters, and telling him, okay, like this dude's your coach from now on. Like, are they actually going to train together, or are they just going to train at their own teams and then just kind of show up and be a team somewhere? It seems silly. Like, I can't imagine it working, but maybe they'll come up with some kind of process that'll surprise me.
Pat, as somebody that grew up an hour and 20 minutes away from the Quad City Silverbacks, there we go. That's a tongue twister. Are you feeling the IFL love here? Are you feeling that this is something that can this actually come together? No, I'll ask you this instead. Will WFL launch? Period. Before
I think
getting past succeeding and competing, will it actually make it to the finish line and start and have an event?
That's tough. That's actually a great question. So here's the thing. As much as I love IFL, the Quad City Silverbacks, and this is different, right? You got GSP involved. Apparently, you've got some other big names.
Montreal Force.
Yeah, Montreal Force. It's in order to really dive into this question a little bit. This goes back into my day job where talking about competitive strategy, and there are, without going down a large rabbit hole of how this all works, there are 2 ways basically you can get any type of competitive strategy for a particular amount of time. One is based in cost dynamics, which means you basically are able to undercut cost, which they are not doing here because they are doing the CBA, health insurance, all that stuff. There's no way they're going to get a competitive advantage on cost. So then the other is getting scarcity and having an asymmetry involved in scarcity. When it comes to MMA, time and time again, it's really been proven that top level fighters in the world, top 50 best fighters in the world or so, are the scarcity. And the UFC has built their business to the behemoth they are by having the scarcity of locking those fighters into crazy long contracts and hoarding the best ranked fighters in the world, and cost dynamics, because again, they're paying them under 20% of total overall revenue. That's why they're huge. For WFL to come in, you've got to get an investor or some backing that looks at this and sees, okay, there's no way we're going to win on cost, so the only thing we can do is win on scarcity. What's something scarce? They're not going after the best fighters of the world. They're going to try, I'm sure, but it's going to take forever. That's what PFL has found out. That's what Bellator has worked on. It doesn't quite work the same way. So then, what do you do instead? Oh, well, our competitive advantage is going to come from this unique format of team-based, right? As Ben mentioned, IFL had one of the best rosters in the sport, and that team format was clearly not providing the third part of a competitive advantage, which is value. You have to have some sort of value there that customers really want to pay for. So this to me is, maybe it launches, but who in their right mind is going to invest? You know what? I'm going to take that back. I'm going to say it launches because they're going to have enough celebrity involved that somebody's going to throw money at it, right? You get GSP involved, like if some other rumors of people involved. If it ends up being like non-MMA guys, celebrities backing this, I think you're going to launch. But are you ever going to compete against major organizations? No. No way. And I can't see it. I cannot, unless timing was the only reason that IFL didn't work for teams, which maybe we've seen crazier things happen in the world of business before.
Well, there was a bit of brand confusion because it was on the same cable channel for me as like Chuck Norris's Karate Combat, which was another team-based sport. And I was like, are they wearing big puffy shoes? Oh, okay, this is that
We
Karate
also
Combat
had
shit.
Tough Man was also about the same time as IFL. That took off for a little while. Yeah, I mean that was on what was it, Fox Sports Net? I think was back when that's where I used to watch it.
Iron Fist, right? Didn't work though, and that was several years later.
Yeah, they and there was the other MMA Pro League that our Ed Carbajal, our friend, has been mentioning. It's very similar. MMA Pro Leagues had a sort of a similar approach. They ran exactly this many events, and then never happened again. So you might be right, Pat. You might be right that they get there and they go, "We're here," and everyone goes, like the.
Well, EAFL too, the Elite Amateur Fight League, which they're trying to set up their whole business plan is to become the NCAA, right? But they're team based as well, same type of thing. And
there was the I think they were actually called Alliance MMA, not to be confused with the gym in California. In that Alliance MMA would have been to unify multiple regional promotions in the United States and run this league versus this league in team-based type of competitions, like the Rounders Fight League would have fought Lumberjacks Western. I don't know the names of anybody, but yeah, that it's a nice idea in execution, but the way the monopsony exists with the UFC, just having so much control over the market share, like just to get your nose in the door. I mean, every organization nowadays is shouting that they're competing with the UFC. We're the number 2. That's the rally cry of so many leagues these days. Bellator, PFL, Combat, One Championship are all trying to be the second fiddle to the UFC. That's how you know it's good that you know your place. Ooh, that sounded mean, but it's bad because there's nowhere you're not going to break through. So I'm optimistic, mostly because I want the fighters to get paid, but 50% of $2,000 isn't a whole lot of money for some of these fighters. So we'll hope that they surprise us. And speaking of surprise, I'm going to go quickly through this segment. It is one of my favorite segments. Ant Walker says it's the best titled segment in all of media history. I won't go that far, but I'll just say it means a whole lot to me. And as I'm not surprised, Mr. Falcons, and we talk about whatever event or news or fight result that happened this week that surprised us or ironically did not surprise us. And I want to get my thoughts out there and get them out of the way, because there was a Bellator fight. Bellator, hooray, Bellator, we're number 2, that had a main card opening bout that we were able to watch because the UFC had just ended. This was a showcase fight. This was a fight no one really paid attention to, and it was Christian Edwards. Christian Edwards, the 5-0 John Jones protege. He's the next John Jones. He's a tough, strong kid. He's got good wrestling. He's got big pop in his punches. And oh yeah, he can choke the living daylights out of you if he gets to you. Like, this is the real deal. He's like 6'5", and he's long and rangy and can kick you in the face and all of these things. And he was a minus 1,100 favorite against a guy named Big Tuna. And people were dumping on Ben Parrish. Ben Parrish is his name. Because of his appearance. This is a gentleman who weighed in well over 300-pound mark, and through MMA, he has been gradually losing weight and fighting down. So now he's down to 205. So that's very impressive. I am impressed and inspired by his journey alone. And he gets out there as a submission expert, I guess you can call it that. He was, I think, 4-1. He was 4-1, and all of his wins had been by tap out. So this is a guy who doesn't really care about standing out for long, and he broke his leg in his last fight a couple years ago. Obvious Bellator setup fight. Guy hasn't fought in years, coming off a bad injury versus our hot shot super prospect. Ben Parrish gets out there and starches this cat in 40 seconds. Bang, bang, out, all the way out. And I am not surprised, Mr. Falcons, that this happened, because what I was saying before about how Naoki Inoue is going to win the Rising tournament because MMA is a cruel mistress. This result, I am so not surprised about, that Ben Parrish, the guy nobody cared about, the big tuna, got up there and laid waste to Christian Edwards, and now he is a sensation on social media because he's a pretty funny, clever, interesting guy. So I advise that you follow Big Tuna out there if you haven't already. Yeah, I'm not surprised, Mr. Falcons, to that result, because that was something. Mr. Roger, what were you not surprised about this week?
Well, I mean, I was not surprised in that I was surprised with again Phil Davis's ability to just take down Yoel Romero. Like, I thought that Phil could easily win. I'm not surprised that Phil won the fight, but I did not expect that kind of wrestling from Phil, and for Yoel to just not be able to stop it. Every time I think of Yoel wrestling, I think back to the crazy transitions he was doing against Weidman back in 2016, where it was just like it was insane. And then you see what Phil was able to do, and I was like, well, okay, I guess that's not at all what I thought was gonna happen. So I wonder what the over-under would have been for Phil Davis takedowns, betting-wise, but I'm sure it would have been very good money for anyone that went on the over, because it's nuts to me that happened.
It was pretty wild. I will say, for my own pride, my lock of the week was not any of the UFC fights. It was, in fact, Phil Davis versus Yoel Romero goes to decision. It was minus 165 when I pointed that out. I really hope everybody cashed in on that, because that was, to me, the most obvious play. Even though I was still surprised by the result, I was not remotely surprised that it went 3 full rounds. Ben Duffy.
Yes.
What were you surprised about, and/or ironically unsurprised about, Mr. Falcons?
Well, we did get the news last week. Really, the news self-announced. Bellator light heavyweight signee Anthony Johnson basically withdrew from all future competition, citing an unspecified illness that he did just say is not COVID. But the pretty despondent Instagram post he put up. And I mean, first of all, none of this is to dunk on Anthony Johnson. Like, whatever he is struggling with, I wish him only the best. But it's really, if this is it, if whatever this is either pulls him away from the sport forever or pulls him away from the sport for long enough that his competitive window is effectively over, he is sneaky high on the list of just most tragically truncated careers in modern memory. I mean, we're talking about a guy who walked away from the sport a couple weeks after his 33rd birthday on the heels of his second loss to Daniel Cormier. And all you could say for sure about Rumble Johnson at that point was, well, he can't beat Daniel Cormier. That was it. He was still the guy I most wanted to see take on John Jones. I mean, when he walked away, like, Jones himself was like, he was the scariest dude in the bunch. He had destroyed Glover Teixeira. He had destroyed Ryan Bader. He had Phil Davis looking like somebody was like had a high-powered rifle to his head from the rafters, how terrified he looked. Those are wins that have aged incredibly well for Anthony Johnson. And he walked away for 4 years. He built himself into a comic book character, showed up at some bare knuckle events, I guess opened and failed to maintain a weed dispensary business, finally came back to the sport. And, I thought, hey, maybe there's some juice left to squeeze here, because power's the last thing to go. And yeah, if this is all we see, I wish I could say I'm surprised, but this is a cruel and capricious sport sometimes. And fighters who willingly give away years of their prime are just courting that capriciousness even more so.
I very much like that as the title to this episode. You unleashed episode 102, A Cruel and Capricious Sport. That's pretty good. So there's some cruelty going on this weekend. And I say that with a heavy heart that Nick Diaz is fighting again at UFC 266. Nick Diaz, who has not won a fight since 2011. I believe Nick Baldwin, our friend, was about 1.5 years old at the time. Anyway, so UFC 266 has a lot to offer for people that want to see all kinds of things happen. Obviously, the main event is a tough 29 coaches fight. The long awaited, long excited, very talked about. Anyway, it's a featherweight title fight that Volkanovski's fighting somebody besides Max Holloway. And yet the only person either man wants to talk about is Max Holloway. So that's happening. Co-main event is Valentina Shevchenko versus Lauren Murphy. So that could be a fight. And then, of course, Nick Diaz versus Robbie Lawler 2, a rematch 17 years in the making. However, not the longest time between two rematches, thank you, UFC. That would be Ken Shamrock and Royce Gracie from UFC 5 to Bellator 149, if I remember correctly. 21 years. Anyway, there are other fights in the card. Good for them. And instead, we'll jump into the Who You Got section because we don't want to tear your time away anymore. Because we got Andrade Calvillo, Blades versus Rosenstrike, Moraes versus Tavares, which that could be fun. Dan Hooker might actually make it to the country. We'll see there. But the top three fights are the fights that everybody are really talking about. And honest and truly, the biggest fight from in terms of metrics and what I've been seeing and paying attention to is the Nick Diaz fight. How the hell does this guy have drawing power? Now, period, at all, anything. I don't understand it. But he's back.
There are Silver Star T-shirts at the back of more closets in America than you think.
Dude,
and they are all coming out.
They are all. Tap out is a display of a Zion's is an expression of combat no more what. He had Nick Diaz. He is 26-9, 2 no contests, 2 of them. He is actually right now a pick'em against Robbie Lawler, former welterweight champion Robbie Lawler, who hasn't won a fight in a while either. I believe they're coming to this fight with a combined unwinning streak of like 7 or so fights, something like that. The numbers escape me, but I guess it's the two have combined for 7 fights without winning a single one. It's been a while. So without further dudes, Nick Diaz versus Robbie Lawler, part 2. Pat, who you got?
This is a tough one because, I mean, Robbie has not looked. I know Ben's looking at me crazy, but here's the thing: Robbie hasn't looked good in his last fights. He's been fighting legit contenders though, except for Ben Askren, which was a whatever type of fight anyway. He was beating. Yeah, that's a whole thing. But I mean, losing to RDA, Covington, and Neil Magny is fine, right? That's not terrible. The way he lost those fights though was pretty not great. Then you have Nick Diaz, who, lost and then it was overturned against Anderson Silva 5 years ago, and then hasn't really, or 6 years ago, whatever it is, hasn't really fought since that.
If I could interject real quick, nobody could have possibly won that fight because both fighters tested positive for banned substances after it happened. Anyways, carry on.
Yeah, so I mean, the reason that it's tough for me is that lately, I feel like especially, we've seen these long gaps in fighter history where they come back after not getting beat up a bunch, after taking some time off, and then they actually look pretty decent, at least in their first couple fights. I could see Nick Diaz, who is still, training and doing marathons and all that stuff, come back and easily outpacing Lawler because he throws very high volume. And so I could see that happening. I could also see Robbie Lawler getting in there and beating up an older Nick Diaz who can't hang and throw at the same pace that he used to because he's now 38 or 39. I'm going to go ahead and lean Nick Diaz based on the amount of volume that he tends to throw and the fact that he's had 5 years off where he's not been putting his body through a ton of stuff, whereas Robbie has had surgeries and getting beat up and has really been having trouble with volume strikers. So I'm going to lean Nick Diaz, but honestly, I just hope it's not a terribly boring fight.
Yeah, I mean, 38 for Diaz. He just turned 38 last month. And Robbie Lawler is, I think, 39 and a half right now. Right now, as of the taping of this broadcast, they are both exactly at minus 110 odds. They are perfectly, ultimately even pick 'em right now, even though Robbie Lawler opened as a 2-1 favorite. And Ben, who you got?
Well, I mean, two things that Pat mentioned are throwing volume and boring fight. Now, I'm thinking back to Diaz's last appearance against the Ghost of Anderson Silva. That was a boring fight, and Diaz did not throw much volume. That's the aftertaste. That's my last memory of Nick Diaz in the cage. And considering how baked he was, maybe I remember that fight better than he does. Who knows? Yeah, Lawler's not looked great recently, but he's not looked great against still a string of top 10, if not top 5 guys. Like Neil Magny was top 10, Covington and Dos Anjos both top 5. Ben Askren should have been a win. I mean, he tombstone pile drivered him, and Askren was all the way the fuck out. I could see him doing that same thing to Diaz. I think Lawler's gonna give Diaz stuff he doesn't like the taste of on the feet. Diaz will want to get it to the ground, which is rare. He used to be the guy that he's going to box you up until you shoot, and then he's going to take your back and choke you out. I've got Lawler in this one, and I've kind of got him big. I'm surprised this is as close as it is on the books.
Would this piece of information change your opinion? Because it's a very forgotten one. I actually let it slip myself. This is a 5-round fight, a 5-round non-title affair at UFC 266. Would that any difference over rounds 4 and 5 between the two, or are you guys still leaning towards Diaz and Lawler respectively?
It doesn't affect it for me. Like Diaz, obviously a legendary cardio machine, but Lawler, especially since he figured out his respiratory problems, moved his camps to Florida, he's a 5-round builder. I don't know if he still is, but at his best, Nick Diaz was an absolute cardio machine, and Robbie Lawler was just a 5-round builder. So,
yeah, no, it doesn't change my opinion too much. Again, and Ben brings up very good points about Diaz's last fight. Although I will say Lawler's last fight against Cerrone, which is his last win, wasn't that.
He took his round off. Like you don't usually see.
Yeah.
You see that in like Thai fights. The guy just like, nah, I'm not going to do anything this round. He took the second round off, and that was his last win in 2017, over 4 years ago. Despite that, at the end of the day, you want to go, Nick Diaz has fought. His last fight was in 2015. Robbie Lawler at least has been fighting guys, and I feel like. Pat, you raise an excellent thought that he hasn't been taking brain trauma. He hasn't been hard sparring. He hasn't been going through grueling camps and nasty injuries.
And some brain trauma, but not through getting
He's been self-inducing any sort of brain trauma, but he hasn't been taking the bludgeoning kind. If he has, it's been purely for academic purposes. And Robbie Lawler has been he has been in the grind, still doing the damn thing at age 39. I can't. I honestly, I see Robbie Lawler winning at least 4 rounds. Like I think it's entirely possible. Here is my question. Nick has historically better facial integrity than Nate does, his brother. He doesn't cut quite as easily. He still is, especially here, he still can bleed a fair amount. You can see scar tissue on all of his pictures. I'm going to go out on a limb here. I'm going to say Robbie Lawler wins by like a 3rd or 4th round doctor stoppage TKO. I think he's going to do what Jorge Masvidal did to Nate. I think damage is going to mount, and he's going to look like Robbie Lawler versus Rory McDonald when Rory round by round had the Doom Guy face and just was slowly transforming into pain. And speaking of transforming into pain, the co-main event that everybody has been waiting for, the minus 1375 favorite She's almost 14-1 in case you don't speak betting odds, which is comical. That's astronomical level of favorite. Valentina Shevchenko is defending her flyweight strap against Lauren. Her name is Lauren Murphy. And Lauren Murphy coming in as a plus 900 favorite. She's put together a win streak of sorts. I mean, she's got 5 in a row. A couple very respectable ranked names, Joanne Calderwood, Roxy Modafferi, Andrea Lee. All 3 of the women are around the ranking somewhere. And she hasn't, she the close fight with Calderwood and a close fight with Lee is fighting Valentina Shevchenko, a woman that many people are trying to say that she should pass Amanda Nunes in the pound-for-pound distinction, which I firmly disagree with. So, Ben, how does Lauren Murphy win this fight? Who you got?
Well, if you're asking me how Lauren Murphy wins, like
if you want to, you don't have to answer that.
I mean, you mentioned that she is on a 5-fight win streak,
Yeah.
And I mean, during that time, she's faced basically every type of fighter the flyweight division can throw at you. She's faced a technically sound Muay Thai kickboxer in Calderwood. She's faced an opportunistic and savvy grappler in Modafferi. She's faced an explosive plus athlete in Andrea Lee. Now she just needs to fight someone who forms like Voltron and has all of those traits at like twice as high a level. I don't see how it's not doable for her, I'll say this much, like at 38, Lauren Murphy is actually fighting the best she ever has. She's finally put everything together. It's a remarkable run and a remarkable story for someone who started doing this just as like a mom who wanted to get in better shape. I mean, aside from my buddy Alex Morono, you don't get many of those stories on the men's side. You don't get people like Betch Kohei and Lauren Murphy. They're like, yeah, I just wanted to get in better shape. I walked into a gym and next thing I knew I was one of the top 10 women in the world. It just doesn't happen in the men's divisions, like except for Alex. What up, dude? This is a bad matchup for her, but just her innate toughness and ability to kind of keep a fight from getting out of second gear. I think this is going to be kind of like the Maya fight where Shevchenko just wins all 5 rounds and maybe Murphy unfairly gets around just because it's less of a beating. And there's that like bit of blinders that you get. Well, it's like, well, if that last round was, I only gave it a 10-9 and it was a complete ass kicking. Well, this was much closer. So, maybe Murphy won this round, but yeah, Shevchenko big. The flip side of Murphy's kind of toughness and second gearness is that she just doesn't pose any positive threats to Shevchenko. Like, she's not going to tire her out. She's not going to hurt her. She's not going to tag her with one lucky punch that puts her head on a swivel. Like, she doesn't have like the Jessica Andrade puncher's chance or anything like that. This is going to be a mauling.
Yeah, I mean, the betting odds reflect as such, and I never would want to disparage any fighter, especially one. Murphy, she earned a title fight. Straight up. She earned it. You don't see flyweight women that go on long win streaks in the UFC. It just doesn't happen. The parity is too close or something like that. But despite that, she's beaten, 5 women in a row. One of them, Lilia Shakarova, was a replacement opponent, but she did what she was supposed to do. She tapped her out. She didn't just fool around. She earned her first submission win. And so that's something. So, Pat, since I obviously can predict that you're going to pick Lauren Murphy, since you're probably leaning towards Shevchenko, just leaning like Diaz.
It's
My question to you is instead, does this fight go the distance?
Good question. I think it does. I think Murphy's tough. I think Shevchenko, while she's had a lot of finishes lately, that's very hard. Now I'm thinking about it. I think Murphy is tough enough that it could be like the Maya fight, like as Ben pointed out. I like Ben's comparison there, and I think that would end up being a decision, where as long as she doesn't make any mistakes, Murphy doesn't make any mistakes, I think this goes the distance. But otherwise, yeah, I mean, this is Shevchenko all day. I disagree with you, Jay, that I believe Shevchenko should be above Amanda Nunes, but I also have Shevchenko winning that second fight against Amanda Nunes, so that's really where it comes down to. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be a mauling, as Ben said, and I think Murphy is tough enough and savvy enough to make it more like a Jennifer Maia mauling than even an Andrade or a. But that's the thing is was gonna confidently say decision, and then I remember what she did to Andrade, and now it's really messing with my head. Where it's like, man, you know. But still, I think Murphy has enough savvy that if she plays it right, she can get a decision loss out of that. That sounds so terrible.
Well,
you play your cards right, you fight the perfect fight, Lord Murphy. You could get a decision
you can
loss.
lose
on your
4
record.
rounds. Handily.
Hey, remember, all Rocky wanted to do was go the distance with the
It's
jab.
true.
That's exactly right.
It's
And
true.
they always talk about on broadcast that it's a moral victory to have survived such a hellacious beating. See also Devin Clark making it to the distance as his teeth were there and over there, and one was in his
And
dad's
Clark's
hair.
best moment was at the very end of the fight where he got on top. It was like,
Yeah.
hey, this goes 5 rounds, man. Yeah, I don't know about that, but
Right, that's the question, man. If we had 2 more rounds, we'd get it done. I genuinely felt that Jessica Andrade had more than a puncher's chance to beat Valentina Shevchenko. I thought the skill set she brought to the table, her aggression, her pace, her ability to push far into a fight was the kind of style that could give Shevchenko problems, because that is what Amanda Nunes did for at least the first time they met. The second fight was, much more back and forth. But that pace was the thing. That was what I thought could be the foil to Shevchenko. And it hilariously was not at all, because the only thing, when I believe on the preview show, I ate a lot of crow afterwards saying that, when this gets up close, Andrade is going to surprise Shevchenko with her ability to lift her up, elevate her and everything like that. And Shevchenko was the one who surprised Andrade. We're going, no, we're going here now. You're my sack of potatoes. I'm going to toss you over here. To that degree, that was the performance that put me on the oh my god Shevchenko train. I still have her behind Amanda Nunes. I believe Valentina Shevchenko will take what Murphy has, the wrestling, the forward momentum, pushing to the fence, drop down for a double, something like that. But Shevchenko will be able to reverse and put Murphy on her back, which is where Murphy does not want to be at all costs. And Shevchenko has proved she's not just a Thai fighter that can do that. I think Valentina Shevchenko is going to get a finish within 3 rounds. Ground and pound, I think, is how she's going to get it, which would be the first time Lauren Murphy will be finished. I would be impressed if Murphy makes the distance. I would be impressed if Murphy wins a round. It is not a disrespect to her skill set, but merely what a bad style matchup. The best thing you can do is bully people around, and she's the one who just say, nah, not so fast, my friend. And that's you're gonna have a bad time. And with that, we have our final fight of 266. Alexander Volkanovski is defending and or not defending, if you don't think he has the title, because Max Holloway beat him in this last fight, defending his featherweight title and his comically long, I believe it's a 19 fight win streak, defending and putting that on the line against Brian Ortega, who is on a 1 fight win streak. And they coach their season of tough against one another, and they're going to fight, and people are going to watch it. And it's a 5-round fight. Volkanovski is about a minus 150 or so favorite, I believe. So it's a fairly good 150, 160. But Ortega's closer. He's actually closer than I thought he would be. So Pat, let's see who you got in this one.
Yeah, this is a great fight, and it's the fight to make, obviously, given where the division stands right now. I've got Volkanovski here. I have him semi-clearly just because Ortega did look very good against Korean Zombie, right? But there are 2 key caveats to how he looked against Korean Zombie that I think some people forget. And that's one, Korean Zombie, as much as I love him, has always struggled to get to that upper echelon outside of Aldo, right? He had that run, he had that fight, but since he's been back, he's had some losses. He gets hit a lot. That's why he's called the Korean Zombie. It presents problems to him ever making it to a title fight. And he was knocking people out and looking fantastic, but what happened here? Well, Ortega hit him, of course, and it really rocked him. And that's the other part I think a lot of people forget, is that Korean Zombie goes on Instagram, I think, or Twitter, or both, after the fight and was like, "Yeah, I don't remember the last 3 rounds. I got hit and got rocked, and I don't remember at all. It was just autopiloting." And so it's one of those things where, yes, Ortega could land a big punch. Volkanovski's chin isn't, titanium. He did get rocked against Mendez. He's had, you land on the button, you can hurt him. But the way Volkanovski beat Max once and then the second time, it's iffy, but again, is he's that volume, sneaky, strategic fighter that will just kind of pick you apart nonstop. And I don't know how Ortega overcomes that. Nothing I saw in the TKZ fight made me think, oh man, Ortega's going to be able to fight Max again and it's going to look completely different. Or, oh, fight somebody like Volkanovski and would be able to, get past Volkanovski's annoying, like, nonstop leg kicks and other things and switching it up to really prevent him basically meeting the same fate he did against Max. So I've got Volk here semi-comfortably. Although maybe I'm wrong and Ortega, time off again. Who the hell knows? Maybe he looks fantastic. He's grown and he puts on a crazy performance. Should be a great fight either way.
Yeah, I think it has potential to be a fight event worthy battle, depending on how long it goes. I will say something controversial, and it's controversial because it almost seems to be defied by numbers. Ortega, like Ben, you said earlier on the show about how Phil Davis doesn't really make changes mid-fight. I don't feel that Brian Ortega makes adjustments to a major degree. What he will instead do is have almost you can't call it desperation because of how many third round stoppages he's racked up. I mean, I think he had 4 in a row at one point when he knocked out Thiago Tavares with a minute to go. He finished Diego Brandao in the first round. He clocked Clay Guida with 20 seconds left, and Moicano, he choked him out with a guillotine. But it's all been opportunistic. It hasn't been, I'm going to approach this differently. It's almost been more of a testament to the fighters that are beating him, letting their foot off the gas a little bit, cruising, and then realizing, oh my God, I have to be buttoned up the whole fight. When he fought Max Holloway, obviously his only loss in his career, it's hard to look at that fight and take anything good away from it other than his ridiculous durability that he has, or the fact that Max Holloway can hit a guy 400 times in the head, and people be like, cool, that's fun. I'm with you, Pat. When I look at the Korean Zombie fight and something we talk about, I didn't learn anything from that fight. I thought, okay, he can beat Korean Zombie. Okay, we kind of knew that he probably could because he'd beaten Frankie Edgar. He'd beaten a younger couple of years ago, Cub Swanson. He has that gear that he can beat that level of fighter. But I don't know if he can rise to the occasion of an Alexander Volkanovski. MMA math is the devil. It's the worst thing in the world. It doesn't work at all. But Volkanovski outstruck Max Holloway. I think the numbers are at least the first fight. The second fight, I mean, total strikes, significant strikes. But anyway, he outstruck him where it counted to win the fights by at least 2 judges' eyes. And Max Holloway hilariously outstruck Brian Ortega. And I feel like I have to go Volkanovski holding on to his belt again. And it should be interesting to see the first time Ortega lands cleanly, how Volkanovski reacts. Because Ortega, he's not a knockout machine. Most of his finishes have come from that crazy thing. There was the Clay Guida knee where Guida ducked down into a knee. Thiago Tavares in the fight that he was done. And Frankie Edgar is the only other one that he went bang. So he has the surprise power. That is going to be fun to see. But until then, I got a Volkanovski over probably 4 rounds to 1. And with that, Ben Duffy, take us home. Who you got between Alexander Volkanovski and Brian Ortega?
I'm definitely leaning Volkanovski here. Ortega could finish this. He has, I mean, even when his striking was really raw when he first arrived in the UFC, and it has improved leaps and bounds, but he's always had a ton of natural power. You could tell that when he landed on people, it hurt. Even if he didn't immediately starch people, he just has kind of a natural thudding power. And obviously his submission game is super elite. He's an outstanding grappler. But I mean, you mentioned his penchant for late finishes. he's had 9 fights in the UFC. He's 7-1 with the one no contest that was a win over Mike De La Torre. The Chan Sung Jung fight was the first time he won a round in the UFC. Until his most recent fight, he had never won a single round in the UFC. He's a guy who loses rounds until he finishes the fight. And I didn't see enough in the Korean Zombie fight to make me think that has changed. Because as Pat pointed out, Zombie's super hittable. Like if you get in a wild scrap with Zombie and you tag him up more than he hits you, you're going to win the rounds. But aside from that, Ortega has just traditionally not been a round winner. He's too willing to let the other fighter dictate the pace, dictate the range. Against fighters of the sub-Max Holloway level, that was fine. Because Ortega is incredibly durable, incredibly opportunistic, has an incredible offensive arsenal, so he could just sit around and lose rounds until he killed the guy. Holloway proved that isn't going to work at the top level. And in that sense, Volkanovski is even a stiffer test because Volkanovski dictates the pace, dictates the range. Like Volkanovski, like win or lose, and it's been all win for like 8 years now. He owns the cage. It's how he, as this just tiny short dude, like has gone on this streak in the UFC. So if Ortega's only hope is to catch Volkanovski with something that, yeah, we've seen him hurt, but like I'm not picking Ortega to like find a finish here, and if not, Volkanovski is just going to win all the rounds. Like each individual round will be competitive, but I bet Volkanovski wins 4 or 5 rounds. He's going to mash Ortega into the cage. He's going to kick his legs, going to do stance switching, get inside on him, punch him up. It's going to be a command performance for Alex Volkanovski.
Yeah, it's what you said that Ortega gives away rounds. That Volkanovski is, I don't want to call him a point fighter, but in terms of his strategy and approach, he has a round-winning type of style where he'll do enough to convince the judges and take the rounds. I mean, he, on the other hand, unlike Ortega, has won a whole lot of rounds in the UFC. I mean, what he did to Jose Aldo. Granted, Aldo post-max and all those things, but he dictated and shut Aldo down. And speaking of shutting down, we're going to have to shut this show down, and that's okay because we had a good time. We ran a little long. We had some excellent conversations. So, Pat, thank you very much for joining us today.
Yes, thank you.
And
Thanks for having me.
Being right in the middle and talking finances and all kinds of crazy stuff with us. It's a good time. Ben, thank you very much for, anchoring us out and taking us home. With that, we'll see you next week.